Daniel Park was a fat, disgusting loner who was tortured by all of his classmates for being the ugliest pig in school, until one day he woke up with a perfect body and had gotten the hottest face and rock-hard abs. However, before Daniel became that handsome idol, he spent his days as the slave of his ruthless bully, Tae-song. On a random day, Daniel groveled on the bathroom floor while Tae-song and his crew were getting turned up from smoking cheap cancer sticks. They hated him because he was short and overweight, so they called him a pig and commanded him to dance around like a circus animal. However, no matter what Daniel did, he could never satisfy the bullies, and they always ended up punching his face into a pulp. Back at home, Daniel took his anger out on his mom, telling her that she was the reason he became so fat and miserable. He tried asking her if he could transfer to another school, but she told him that they couldn't afford it, and that he would lose touch with all of his classmates.
Back at home, his mother tells him she was at the school to discuss transfer options. She tells him he can transfer to a school in Seoul, but he will need to live on his own because she can't leave her job. Hyun-suk moves to the slums in Seoul. His place is small, but he is glad to have a fresh start. In the city, Hyun-suk bumps into a girl and is surprised when she actually apologizes to him. He decides to try and be a different person, but ends up creeping the girl out. The girl's boyfriend shows up and doesn't like the way Hyun-suk was looking at his girl. The man ends up beating him up, and everyone records him getting beaten. It gets posted online, and Hyun-suk cries as he reads the mean comments about him. He cries himself to sleep, but when he wakes up, he is surprised to see his new body. He sees himself on the ground and tries to wake himself up. He wakes back up in his body and figures it was all a dream, but then he sees the other body lying next to him. He ends up figuring out that every time he sleeps, he switches between the bodies. Hyun-suk starts at his new school in the fashion design class, and all the girls are amazed by his good looks. When he takes his seat, he finds he is next to the guy that beat him up, and his girlfriend is also in his class. Luckily, the guy doesn't recognize him and introduces himself as Jin. Hyun-suk gets approached by a girl named Hannah, and she flirts with him. Jin calls her out, but sees that his girlfriend is also interested in him. He gets fired up, but the teacher continues on with the class. Later at lunch, everyone stares at him, and Hannah introduces the different groups of students. She asks him why he chose to join the fashion design class, and we find out that with his poor academics, fashion design was the only thing he could transfer to. Back in class, he gets sleepy because he spent all the previous day testing out his new body. He ends up falling asleep and waking up in his body back at home. He realizes what happened and tries to fall back asleep. He manages to switch back when Hannah wakes him up at the end of class. Hyun-suk gets a job at the convenience store to work nights, but we see he came in his other body to ask about the job. The owner is keen to hire him, but he ends up saying it's for his friend. The owner tries to change his mind when he sees his other form, but Hyun-suk impresses him with his knowledge of all the cigarette brands from his experience as an errand boy. Hyun-suk starts working, and some guys come in to buy cigarettes, but he recognizes them from his class, so he asks them for ID, and ends up turning them down. Jin joins them, and realizes his name is also Hyun-suk. He takes out his anger on him, and beats him up again. They end up taking a nude photo of him, so he doesn't go to the cops. The next day at school, Jin and his boys laugh about beating him up the previous night. Hyun-suk tells them off, and Jin prepares to fight him, but gets stopped by another student named Jae. Jin gets free, and continues to attack. Hyun-suk has been beaten so much in the past, he can read the punches, and now that he has a body that can react, he easily dodges. Everyone is shocked Jin's punch missed. Jin continues to swing, but Hyun-suk beats him with a single punch to the stomach. The news of this fight is spread to the other classes, in particular the vocal class and the architecture class, who decide they need to teach Hyun-suk a lesson. At night, Hyun-suk notices a suspicious guy who ends up stealing and making a run for it. Hyun-suk chases after him, but finds he was doing it for the bullies. The bullies force them to fight each other, but they are saved when Bosco appears. He has a strong sense of justice and stands up to the bullies. The next day, Hyun-suk asks Hannah about Bosco. We learn he is the leader of the Burn Knuckle gang in the architecture class. They are joined by the Three Stooges, and Bosco sees them all hanging out together.
He found Daniel in the midst of the school's top bullies and decided to teach him a lesson. So he held Daniel by his shoulder and forcefully made him sit on a chair. However, to everyone's surprise, Daniel grabbed his hand and released Bosco's grip from his shoulder. Bosco was about to throw a punch at Daniel, But BMJ intervened and stopped him, apologizing to Daniel as he escorted Basco away. When his friends were angry with BME's intervention, he pointed at the redness on Basco's wrist, saying that Basco would have been the one to get knocked out. The three bullies from last night hurried over to Daniel and showered him with praise, begging him to be their friend. This was the first time in his life that he ever felt like someone wanted to be his friend, and Ha-Nul asked him to join them for a fun night of drinking grape juice, so Daniel decided to give it a try. That evening, Daniel joined Hyun-do and his company at their regular drinking spot, but when Jin Seong arrived, he was uncomfortable seeing him around them and decided to drink heavily. Ha-Nul noticed Daniel was wearing an oversized shirt and asked him why, but Daniel was determined to keep his secrets hidden, so he lied that it belonged to his roommate. After a few minutes, Hyun-do began making fun of the victims he had bullied and attempted showing Ha-Nul some of their pictures on his phone. But Daniel grabbed it and crushed it with his hands, warning them to never bully other people. Having drank too much grape juice, he collapsed onto the table and realized he had accidentally woken up in his disgusting body, so he immediately ran to the grape juice party, lying to everyone that he was just bringing Daniel home for an errand.
Back at his house, his mother comes to visit and she sees him sleeping. Hyun-suk returns and explains he is her son's roommate and that Hyun-suk works at night. He ends up taking her out for coffee, and Bosco happens to be there and he listens in. His mom feels comfortable with him and opens up to him. She thanks him for being his son's friend, but Bosco thinks he is just using him and gets enraged. As they leave, his mom prepares some cardboard to sell for scrap and reveals she had to take a side job so she could send him money. She ends up giving him money for the coffee, and Bosco is enraged seeing him take her money. After she leaves, Bosco confronts him. He thinks Hyun-suk is a liar and is using his other self as an errand boy. Hyun-suk is confused, but Bosco attacks him. He manages to dodge all of his attacks, and Bosco demands the money that his mother gave him. Seeing him as another bully trying to take his money, Hyun-suk fights back. He spins and elbows Bosco in the face, knocking him out. Later at work, Bosco comes in and apologizes for being unable to get the money for him. He tells him he should train, and Hyun-suk tries doing some push-ups, but a beautiful girl suddenly comes in and he is embarrassed. She turns out to be nice, and even buys him a drink for his workout. We meet a guy named Leon as he prepares to show off his new shoes and exclusive ring, but he gets overshadowed by Jay, who wears designer brands all over. Even Hannah is interested, but he doesn't really talk. The girls crowd around Hyun-suk as usual, but Leon can tell from his shoes and bag that he is poor and has no fashion sense. They make a plan to expose him, but Jay overhears. Later, Hyun-suk runs into a guy named Duke. As he gets bullied by guys from the vocal class, Hyun-suk stands up for him, but the teacher stops them from fighting. He offers Duke a hand, but he doesn't take it and walks away. At the end of the day, Hyun-suk gets a call from his mother, and Jay overhears that it's his birthday tomorrow. Jay ends up giving him a present for his birthday, and Hyun-suk finds the bag filled with clothes. As Jay leaves, there is a whole mountain of bags. The next day, Leon prepares to embarrass Hyun-suk, but is shocked when he comes in wearing all high-end fashion. Hannah asks where he got the clothes from, and Hyun-suk says it was his friend. Elsewhere, at a music studio, an audition is being held. Both Duke and his bully, Vinny, are auditioning. Vinny gets called up first, and he manages to impress the producer. The producer sees that Duke is the only one left, and Duke gets sent away without getting the chance to perform. Despite this, he continues to write lyrics and hopes to make it one day so he can take care of his grandma. The next day, he looks at a poster, and Hyun-suk comes up to him. Hyun-suk tries to be friendly, but Duke thinks it's weird. At lunch, Duke gets bullied by Vinny because he applied to sing at the festival. Vinny tells him he would be an embarrassment to their class and slaps him around. Hyun-suk steps up, and he is joined by Jay. Jin also steps up, and Bosco appears as well. Vinny and his boys leave, and all the girls think Hyun-suk is so cool. He checks on Duke, but he just walks away. Hyun-suk finds the torn application and puts it back together. He tries to give it back to Duke the next day, but Duke is sick of his nice guy act. He says that everything he goes through will just make his music better, just like his hero Eminem, who made it from nothing. In class, Vinny talks about his performance for the festival and is confident he will win. He sees Duke writing his lyrics and gets annoyed, thinking he should just give up. After school, he beats Duke up again and rips up his notepad. Meanwhile, Hyun-suk learns more about the festival from Hannah, and she suggests that he could perform. Hyun-suk is on cleaning duty, and he thinks about what it would be like to perform. He ends up singing, and Duke hears him from outside. Duke appears behind him, and he is surprised. Duke asks him to be his partner to perform at the festival. The next day, Hyun-suk is amazed Duke has already written lyrics. They practice, and Jo is amazed at the two of them, but Duke tells Hyun-suk he needs to improve his technique. However, he warns him not to overpractice, because vocal cords are delicate. After school, Hyun-suk's throat is already a bit sore, but he finds that he can practice in his other body. The pretty girl shows up again, and compliments his voice. She gives him some lozenges for his throat, and wishes him luck. In the next practice session, Duke reminds him not to practice too much, but he says he didn't, at least not in this body. Duke is amazed at his improvement, and thinks he must be a genius. After school, Duke and Jo get bullied by Vinny and his boys. They force Jo to hit Duke, but luckily Vinny gets called away. Jo apologizes to Duke, and they both end up at the convenience store. They head out the back, and Jo apologizes for stealing the other day. They end up bonding over all the different ways they have been bullied, and are thankful that they met Hyun-suk. Bosco suddenly appears and asks them about Hyun-suk. They all vouch for him, and Bosco realizes he mistook him for a bad guy this whole time.
At Ho-bin's studio, he plotted a scheme to ruin their experience at the show. So the day of the show finally arrived, and Daniel was feeling very anxious about his performance, but Deok-pa encouraged him to stay calm and confident. Having spotted Soo-young, he rushed to greet her, but she took him for a perv since she didn't recognize him in this other body. When Daniel tried to convince her that he had no bad intentions towards her, her bodyguard suddenly grabbed him, but he shook off his grip. The man perceived it as a hostile reaction and an invitation for a fight, so he launched a straight kick at Daniel, but he defended himself with his arms. However, it was a feint as the man swiftly changed tactics and delivered a powerful side kick to Daniel's head, immediately knocking him to the ground, coughing. The guard prepared to deliver a finishing blow, but Soo-young urged him to stop, yet he refused, saying he was ordered to annihilate anyone who tried to touch her. But Basco arrived, calling himself Daniel's friend, and threatening to beat up the guard. In a split second, the man punched Basco in the face, but he remained unfazed despite being injured, demanding that the guard remove his glasses so they could fight fairly. But Soo-young stepped in before it escalated further, and eventually departed with him, leaving Basco and Daniel alone. As the show finally began, Ho-bin took the stage for his performance, thrilling the crowd with his fantastic song. In the backstage, Daniel was very nervous, so Deok-pa advised him to imagine singing for someone he deeply loved, telling him it would help in calming his nerves. After they appeared on the stage, the crowd was amazed by Daniel's appearance, but the host made fun of Deok-pa, saying he looked like a completely different specimen, and that brought laughter from the audience.
Hyun-suk remembers Duke's advice, and thinks about his mother. He manages to sing, and everyone is blown away. Even the music producer is impressed. Everyone cheers for them, and they win the festival. The producer comes up to them, and wants to make them a star, but only gives his card to Hyun-suk. Hyun-suk asks what about Duke? The producer says he is good, but doesn't have what it takes to go pro. To everyone's surprise, Hyun-suk turns down the producer's offer. After that, their performance is shared online, and it even ends up being sent to the girl from the store. She sees Hyun-suk, but realizes he is singing the same song she heard at the store. She wonders how it's possible, and it's revealed she also has a second body.